Hi guys. So in this video, I will be explaining you top 15 important questions for freshers as well as for experience, like which are most commonly asked questions. Okay. With respect to exception handling. So exception handling is one of the crucial aspect of the Java interview question, similar to OOPS concept and other system design based questions. So similar to that, exception handling, JVM architecture, Java 8 concepts, data structure, these are most crucial things where 80% of the questions has been asked in core Java. So let's understand that and let's see what all type of questions that are most commonly asked. Let's get started. I hope you can see my screen now. So we'll be discussing top 15 like tricky or most commonly asked questions in exception handling part. Okay. Yeah. The first example question that can be asked is like in a try block, I'm throwing new null pointer exception. Okay. With some message like test exception, and in catch block, I am catching arithmetic exception. Okay. So here I am printing like I have caught arithmetic exception, and finally I am printing one finally blocks one statement I am printing. So what can be the output for this code? So here, if you can observe, I am throwing null pointer exception over here. Okay. But here I am catching arithmetic exception. So that is nowhere related with each other. So that means this null pointer exception will not be caught by this catch block. So it will go to finally block. So what it will print? It will print finally block and then test exception. This message will be printed over here. So finally block will be executed at any scenarios. Okay. So you should not think about like finally block, it will go or it will not go. No, finally block will go in any scenario except few cases where there is some error is coming or some scenarios that I will be telling you. So in that scenarios, finally block will not get executed. Apart from that, in 99% of the case, finally block will get executed. Okay. So this should be kept in our mind. Okay. And this try catch finally. How it is being used, you should know the basic concepts first. Okay. So basic concepts in the sense like try with catch. It is it can be possible. Okay. Try with finally. That is also possible. But catch and finally without try block is not possible. Okay. Then try with multiple catch blocks. It's possible. Okay. But try with catch multiple catch blocks should be written in such a way that it should go from the sub level classes to the top level classes. Okay. It should follow the inheritance concept. So similar to that, if I can focus like first catch block, it should be of like file not found exception. Second catch block should be the supermost class of that particular class, that is IO exception. And then we can write the supermost class of that, that is the main exception. So that if there is any specific exception with respect to file not found is coming, that is just a part of IO exception. That means within IO exception, there can be multiple other types of exception as well. But if there is some exception with respect to file not found specific to that, you are trying to catch it. So for that, we can handle it specifically with catch block, like catch of file not found exception. But if some other type of exceptions are also coming, still that can be caught as well in other catch blocks. So it should handle all types of exceptions. So this type of try with multiple catch blocks is also very important to understand. Then comes try with resources. So in try with resources, if you are writing any kind of stream creation like buffer stream reader or buffer stream writer, or you are opening a new stream, file writer stream like that, if you are doing, then in that scenario, you don't need to close it explicitly in finally block. As soon as try with resources block gets executed, automatically those stream object references will get closed. Okay, so that is the advantage of making use of try with resources. Okay, and try with catch, one catch which is having multiple exceptions in pipe operation. So that is also very much important. So we can have multiple exceptions in one catch block only. Okay, so there are multiple categories of try catch scenarios that can be understood, and based upon that only questions will be asked in the Java interviews. Okay, so this is one of the example that we have discussed till now. So let's understand another type of example. Okay, so here I think you got the output like finally block and test execution. So it will exception will be caught, and in this scenario arithmetic exception is being caught, right? So it is not null point exception. So here in catch block it will not go, but it will throw this test exception. Okay, next. Yeah, so this is the scenario that I wanted to share with you guys. Like try, and under that I am writing system.exit 0. So this is one of the scenario where it will not go to finally block. Why? Because as soon as JVM will look into this line like system.exit 0, so it will give the notification to the JVM like it should be exited suddenly. At that point of time, there is an emergency breakdown and we have to just go out of that condition or any loop, or any entire Java program, we have to go out of that line. So after this line, no other line will get executed. Let's suppose this line is at line number 2. Okay. And after system.exit 0, anything is written after this line, it will not get executed. It will just go out of the entire program. So that is the major feature of writing system.exit 0. And in this scenario, it will not go to finally block. So this question also is asked in the interview. So in which scenarios the pointers after try block, it will not go to the finally block? What can be that scenario? So that is system.exit 0. So you should prepare for that as well. Okay. Next type of question is this. So in the try block, I am throwing some exception. Within that, some message is there like test exception. And in finally block, I am catching that exception. I'm throwing new runtime exception. Okay. So in that scenario, it's fine. I'm catching the exception and I'm throwing the exception only. So it's like it's same only. The exception which I am throwing and I am catching, both are same. So it will get caught in the catch block and it will throw runtime exception along with the test. Okay. And it will print finally executed also. So it will throw the exception as well with test message. It will throw runtime exception as well. And then it will go to finally block as well. So this all 3 lines will get executed over here. I hope you got the clarity on this, right? So here, this is also one of the category of question. So in the try block, I am doing divide by 0. This is what type of exception? This is arithmetic exception, right? So here what I am catching, I am trying to catch null pointer exception. So null pointer exception and arithmetic exception, both are different kind of exception. So it is not matching with each other in any kind of inheritance level as well. It is like 2 different aspects of it. So this arithmetic exceptions cannot be caught in null pointer exception. So how it will move in the stack trace, it will go to see like, is there any other catch block which handles this arithmetic exception? Like, is there any arithmetic index out of bound exception is there or not? Is there any arithmetic exception being caught or not? Or divide by 0 exception is there or not? No. Any other type of exception is not being caught in a catch block explicitly. So it will print the finally block statement and then JVM will throw this exception stating that arithmetic index exception is there and it has not been caught. Okay, so it has not been caught. So JVM will by default throw it at the end. So this is the entire flow. So basically JVM will go through each and every line. Okay, before JVM throwing, it will allow the programmer to see like what all code has been written, and based upon that at the end, if that exception is not being caught, then in that scenario only it will be thrown explicitly by the JVM, or else if it is handled by the code, so exception can be handled by the code and will be thrown by the code only. Okay. So the condition is that it needs to be get caught. That is one and only condition. I hope you got the clarity. So here the output will be what? Finally block, and after that it will print the arithmetic exception, divide by 0 exception. Okay. That will not go to catch block over here. Next question is this. So in a try block, I am doing result equal to 10 divided by 0, but I am having exception. Okay. So will it go to catch block or not? Tell me. And after that, I am throwing the exception again. Throw E. That means I'm throwing the exception again. What will happen in this scenario? Try to pause for a second and try to think like what will be the answer? What will be the solution for this question? Okay, I hope you have thought for it. So if I see the first line, result equal to 10 divided by 0, what is it? It's an arithmetic exception, divide by 0 exception. So now in the catch block, what is written? In the catch block, it is written exception E. So that means it's divide by 0 or arithmetic exception. It is coming under main exception only. So it is following the inheritance hierarchy. So whenever inheritance hierarchy is being followed, then in that scenario, what will happen? It will go to the catch block and then it will print caught exception. Okay. And after printing caught exception, it will throw the exception stating that arithmetic index out of bound exception is there. And at the end, finally block will be printed. Finally block state. Okay. So here the output will be what? Caught exception, then it will throw the exception, and then it will print finally block. Okay. So you can run it in your IDE and you will get to know like what is the output for this. Okay. So here, this is the concept. My main motto is to let you know what concept is lying beneath it, like how this flow is working in exception handling. Okay. Next type of question. So here if you try to understand, so here I have thrown E and still it is going to finally block. And here it's a return statement written in try block. So now will it go to finally block? Do let me know. I'm returning it from the try block. So now will the pointer go to finally block or not? So in try block, I'm printing try block, okay? And then I'm returning it from then and there itself. So if you understand from any method perspective, wherever I'm writing return, it will return from that particular line and other lines will not get executed, okay? But in this scenario, what will happen? In try, I've written the return statement, but it will still go to finally block. As I've already told you before, like 10 minutes back only, I've already told you, like finally block will get executed in 99% of the scenario, except few exception scenarios where finally block will not get executed. Okay, so in this scenario, irrespective of the fact that I am returning it from the try block, still it will go to finally block and it will print finally block. Okay, so it will print try block and it will print finally block. Okay, so if there is any return statement present in finally block, it will get executed after printing this finally block as well. Okay, I hope you got the clarity on this. Next is this type of question. So in array, okay, I'm creating one new array of size 5 and I'm trying to get the data of array of 10. Okay, so we are having the size of array of 5 only, but we are trying to fetch the data at 10th index. Will that be possible? No. So what type of exception it will be? It will be index out of bound exception. So is it being caught in the catch block? Let's see. So in the catch block, I have written null pointer exception, then pipe. This thing I've already told you in the initial stage, right, of this PPT. Like I can handle multiple exceptions with pipe operator as well. So first it will see that whether it's matching with null pointer exception or not. No, it's not matching. Then it will see another type of exception, array index out of bound exception. It's matching or not? Yes, it's matching. So it's actually going out of bound. So this condition will get satisfied, array index out of bound exception, it will satisfy, and then it will print caught. It will print a class name like arithmetic index out of bound exception class, and then it will throw the exception. Like basically it is throwing arithmetic index out of bound. So like this, the output will be coming. Okay. So it will not print anything with array of 10 because it's not there. It will directly throw the exception like array index out of bound exception. Okay. I hope you got the clarity. Here it is another type of example, like I'm throwing exception, test exception. Okay. So this exception is being caught or not? No. Why? Because exception is the supermost class, and these are just the subclasses of checked as well as unchecked exception. Okay. And here in catch block, there are two catch blocks I have written. One is illegal argument as well as null pointer. Any of them get satisfied, then it will print caught specific exception, or else it will go anyhow to exception. So first catch block will not get executed over here. So this should be the hierarchy that I wanted to tell you over here. So if I show you, like first catch block will be the lower hierarchy exception. Okay. And second catch block after the respective catch blocks, as it is coming in sequence, the respective catch block should have higher precedence. Okay. Should have higher order of the exception than the previous catch block. Okay. I hope you got the clarity on this. Okay. So first of all, it will check whether it's illegal argument exception or null point exception or not. It's not satisfied, then it will go to parent level exception. So parent level of this exception can be other type of exception as well. Okay. But here I've considered exception so that any other kind of exception can be handled over here. So here this I'm throwing exception. So it will come here. It will print caught generic exception. Okay. I hope you got the clarity on this. Now let's understand some example with respect to overriding and constructor based exception handling questions. So there can be some kind of exception handling question that contains some questions with respect to method overriding, like overridden method is throwing some exception or constructor is throwing some exception. This type of questions can also come, right? So let's understand what type of questions can come in that particular scenarios. Okay. So this is one of the example that I wanted to tell you, that there is one parent class. Okay. So in the parent class, what is happening? In the parent class, I am having display method over here. Okay. So in a parent class, I am having display method. Okay. And display method throws exception, which is a generic exception. Okay. And I'm printing parent display. And then there's a child class which extends parent class properties. And here I'm overriding that display method and I'm printing child display, but this display method is not throwing any kind of exception. No checked or no unchecked, nothing is throwing. Okay. Then in the main method, I am creating the object of this child class and I'm storing it in the parent class reference. Okay. And then from this reference, I am calling this display method. Then what will happen? So here, if you observe, I'm creating the object of the child class. Okay. but we are storing it in a parent object reference. So here it will first go to the child block because I'm creating the object of the child class. So it will first create an object of child class, and then what will happen? It will try to call the display method of the child. But before calling the display method of child, it will first check in the parent whether there is a display method or not. Yes, there is display method and it is throwing me exception. Okay, but display method is present in the child class as well. So here there is one concept. Okay, the concept is that in the parent class, if the method is throwing some exception, then the parent class overridden method should throw an exception which is lesser or smaller in hierarchy as compared to the parent class method throwing exception. So here if you observe, parent class display method is throwing exception. Okay, so here if you can observe, I'm giving one example. So if the parent class exception is IO exception, okay, so here it is not throwing any exception. For your better understanding, I am telling you, like if the parent class method is throwing IO exception, let's suppose, okay, parent class method is throwing IO exception, and in child class display method is throwing what? Child class method is throwing file not found exception. Okay, like that it's being thrown by the child class display method. Then what will happen in this scenario? It will work perfectly fine. Like parent class display method is throwing upper level exception and child class display method is throwing subclass level exception. So it will work perfectly fine. But if I'm doing the reverse, like if parent class display method is throwing file not found exception and child class display method is throwing IO exception, then it will not work out. What will happen in that scenario? It will start throwing me compilation error. Like it will throw compile time error. Why? Because it is not following the rule of overriding with respect to exception. So whenever there is being exception being thrown in the overridden method, in that scenario, the subclass overridden method should throw exception which is lesser in hierarchy than the parent class method. Okay, so parent class method, whatever exception is being thrown, we have to make sure that child class overridden method should throw exception which is lesser or smaller in hierarchy than this particular method. Okay, so after reiterating multiple times, I hope this thing got into your head as of now, like in which scenario, what type of exception is applicable over here. Okay, so now let's remove this. So now try to guess what will be the output for this. Try to see and understand like what will be the output for this scenario. Okay, so if I see over here, what will be the output in this scenario? It will just print what? Exception, and this then it's not throwing any exceptions. Automatically it will come in under the subclass category. So it will print what? It will print child display on. It will not print parent display. Okay, because this method is being overridden. Okay, so this is the scenario with respect to method overriding. Next, this is another example. So just I have shown you, right? This is a null pointer exception. This is IO exception. These two exceptions are of different category. They are not following any other kind of inheritance hierarchy. Okay, so there are two things. One is following inheritance hierarchy, another not following inheritance hierarchy. So if it is not following inheritance hierarchy and still it is not at the same level, okay, then in that scenario also it will start throwing the compile time error. Okay, so if you see null pointer exception is coming at later stage under unchecked exception. Okay, but if you see IO exception is coming under unchecked exception. Null pointer is coming under checked exception, but those two are in different categories. These two exceptions are not related with each other. Okay, so IO exception is a parent of file not found exception, but it is not a parent of null pointer exception. Okay, so that's why it is not interrelated with each other at any point. So it will start throwing me compile time error. Okay, but I can take one more example over here. So if I am putting here file not found exception in the parent class display method and child class I am putting IO exception, will it work or not? No, still it will not work out because parent class display method is throwing file not found exception which is lesser in hierarchy than the IO exception which is being thrown by the child class display method. So what can be the correct way around? The parent class display method should throw IO exception and child class display method should throw file not found exception because file not found is lesser in hierarchy than IO exception. So then it will work fine. I hope you got the clarity on this. So now let's understand next example. Okay, so in a parent class, what we are doing, I am throwing file not found exception and child class constructor. So here I am explaining you with respect to constructor. Now this there is no overriding. Okay, so overriding concepts I have already explained you in before PPTs. So now let's understand it with respect to constructor how exception hierarchy will work out. So if parent class constructor is throwing file not found exception, and child class constructor is throwing the IO exception. So will it work fine for me? You will think, like, if I'm considering with respect to overriding concept, then I think it will not work out, right? No, in constructor, the scenario is opposite. Okay, so if I am trying to explain you properly, then you will understand. So with respect to overriding, if I'm considering with respect to overriding concept, then in that scenario, whenever there is parent class method is throwing certain exception, okay, let's suppose exception, then child class overriding method should throw exception which is lesser in hierarchy as compared to the parent class overridden method, parent class method. But in case of constructor, the reverse happens. In case of constructor, if parent class constructor is throwing certain exception, like let's suppose file not found exception, then child class constructor should not throw any exception which is lesser in hierarchy than file not found exception. Then child class constructor will throw exception which is higher in hierarchy than parent class constructor throwing exception. So child class constructor can throw me what? IO exception. So for constructor, it will go from parent to child. If I say it will increase in hierarchy, and in overriding from parent to child, display method was there, right? So parent to child, if I am going, then it will go lower in hierarchy. So this hierarchy concept should be very much clear. From parent to child. So whenever I'm going from parent to child, in case of method overriding, it will be having lesser exception in hierarchy. And then with respect to constructor, the exception should be at a higher parent level, okay, with respect to constructor. So this is the scenario that we have to understand. I hope you got the clarity on this. So similar to that only, this is there. So parent class constructor is throwing me file not found exception, okay, and child class constructor is throwing me IO exception. So what will happen in this scenario? So if parent class constructor file not found and child class constructor IO exception, it's totally fine. Okay, so it will work totally fine. And what it will print out, I am creating the object of child method, and then I'm storing it in the parent reference. So whenever I'm doing that, it will create the object, but it will go to parent. Okay, so in the parent, what is written? Throwing file not found is working perfectly fine, and we are not overriding any method, so it will not go to child class, and it will print parent constructors, and it will throw file not found exception with this message, file not found. Okay, so like this it will print out. Okay, so it will not go to child class at all. We are creating the object of child class, but through inheritance it will first go to parent class constructor, and we are not overriding anything, so it will not go to child class overridden method. It will directly print whatever is there within the parent class constructor. I hope you got the clarity on this. Okay, so now let's go to the next question, example 5. So here I have reversed it. So here if you observe, parent class is throwing IO, child class constructor is throwing file not found. So here if you see, it is going lower in hierarchy, so it will start throwing me compile time error. It should not go lower in hierarchy, it should go upper in hierarchy with respect to exception. Okay, I hope you got the clarity. Next, there is one bonus question that has been asked to me in the interview, so let's understand this. So in the main method, what is happening? In the main method, I am throwing bad method within try block, and then I'm catching exception. Exception is a topmost in all the exception block hierarchy, right? And then I'm printing caught with message, and in finally block I'm printing finally block gets executed, and this bad method is throwing me error. Okay, bad method is throwing me error, and with this error I am printing some message here like error thrown from bad method. So what will happen in this scenario? Try to think for 5 seconds. I'm giving you 5 seconds. Try to think on that. I hope you have thought on it. So if I focus on it, then bad method is throwing me what? It is throwing me error. It is not throwing me any exception. So in that scenario, what will happen? It will not go to catch block. Why it will not go to catch block? Because it is throwing me error, and error cannot be caught in exception. Can error be caught in exception? It's not possible, right? Only exceptions can be caught within exception. Error can't be caught in exception. So here what will happen? It will throw me the error, okay, but it will not go to catch block, and directly it will go to finally block, and it will print me finally block gets executed. So what will be the output over here? It will print me error thrown from bad method, and then it will print finally block gets executed. Like this, it will be the flow of the output. Okay, I hope you got the clarity on this. Okay, now jump on to the next question. So these are some practical output based question that is most frequently asked in Java interviews for freshers as well as experience that I have covered over here. So now let's understand some theoretical based question that can be asked in interviews. Okay, so some question is like, what is a supermost exception? So here, if you can observe, supermost exception with respect to exception handling, it is throwable. Okay, so if you observe over here, throwable is a class. Okay, so this throwable is the supermost class of all these exception as well as error. So whether it is exception or whether it is error, in both type of scenarios, throwable class is the supermost class. Okay, so this thing should be kept, this thing should be there in your mind before answering any question on that. And there is object class, which is topmost of the throwable class. Okay, so our object is of topmost of anything, not with respect to exception handling. Okay, so within exception, there can be like checked exception, unchecked exception. Those things also you should be knowing, like what is checked, what is unchecked. So within checked, you can see like IO exception is coming, interrupted exception, remote exception. Within unchecked, there is runtime exception. Within unchecked exception, runtime exception. These are the examples. Okay, so these are the examples with respect to runtime exceptions. Okay, and there are other examples as well. So if I consider over here, so these are IO exceptions. Okay, so IO exception, file not found exception, remote interrupted, these are all are coming under checked exceptions part. Okay, and if I see the error part, so in the error part, if I focus, so these are coming under error part. So error part means it is not being caught. Error cannot be caught, right? So for that, there is something called a stack overflow error, out of memory error, verify errors, which are coming under virtual machine error and linkage error. So these are certain kind of errors, and errors can't be caught. We can catch only exception. Okay. So this chart should be there in your mind. Okay, so this doesn't contain everything, like SQL exception you can't see over here. So there are various categories of exception. Okay, so from a brief overview point of view, for understanding purpose, if they ask you, interviewer ask you like what is supermost exception, you can tell like throwable is a supermost exception of all the exception classes. And within exception, there can be two categories: checked exception, unchecked exception. For unchecked, runtime exception are coming. That means it is being executed at runtime, and these are the examples of unchecked exception. And for checked exception, that means these exceptions are being checked at compile time by the compiler. So these are some of the examples for that: IO exception, interrupted exception, remote exception. Okay, so these are some of the examples for that. I hope you got the clarity on this. So now let's go on to the next question. What happens if an exception is not caught? What will happen? So in that scenario, I've already explained you a bit like how JVM is working internally. So first of all, JVM will go to the particular class where there is main method being written. Okay. And then after that, it will try to see like, is there any exception coming or not? Okay. So if I want to show you over here, so here is JVM. Okay. So here is JVM, and here basically you have written some code. Okay. Main method code you have written over here. And within that, you have written something within try block. Okay, and then you have catch it. There is a catch block over here. There's something written within catch block, and then something finally. Maybe you have written, maybe you don't have written. It doesn't matter. So like, let's suppose this type of scenario is there. This is main method basically. Okay, so what will happen? JVM will first go to the main method. Okay, and then it will start executing the lines within the try block, and then it will see like if there is any exception or not. If there is any exception coming, then it will try to see in the catch block whether that exception is being caught or handled within catch block or not. So if that exception is being caught in a catch block, it's perfectly fine. It will throw that exception with a message. Okay. Or else if it is not being caught in the catch block, okay, then what will happen? It will go to finally block. Finally block also, it will see whether it's caught or not. No, it's not caught. Then what will happen? It will go to the JVM back again, and JVM will throw the exception explicitly like this exception is being come. Okay, with exception stack trace and what's the exact message, full print stack trace, everything it will print JVM. Okay, so this is the exact flow. Like if we are catching exception or not catching exception, exceptions will be thrown by JVM explicitly. Okay, so that is being programmed. JVM is being programmed in such a way that first of all, it will check whether the exception is being caught or not by programmer or not. If it is caught, it's perfectly fine, or else JVM will catch it and it will throw it at the end. So this is the full flow. I hope you got the clarity on this. Now let's jump on to the next question. Can a finally block override return value? So this is important question basically for experienced candidates, and for freshers also they may ask this question. So in the test class, I am having main method, I'm printing something. Then I'm having static method, like method with finally block. Okay, so here I'm trying to return something. Okay, I'm printing something like in try block, and then I am returning something over here. So if you observe over here, I am returning 10 from here in a try block. Then in the finally block, I am again returning something. Try to understand that. In try block, I am returning 10. So if I'm writing any method, and at any point, if I'm returning anything, it will try to return it from then and there itself. Okay, and then it will go to the caller method, which has called this method. Okay, like that basically it works, right? It should go to main method, and then from here it should go to JVM. But here in try catch finally block, it will not happen like that. If finally is written, if finally is written, and if try block is returning me 10, it will still go to finally block, and then it will see what is written over here. So here also, if 20 is being returned, then the try block return statement will be overwritten by finally block return statement, and then it will return me 20 from here to the main method. Like that, the flow of execution will be there. Okay, so it will be like a stack being followed internally. So first it will go to print statement in try block. It will be having 10 over here. Okay, then it will go to finally block. It will print 20 over here. Okay, and then when it goes to main method, the first and foremost thing is 20, which is being popped out. So 20 will be printed and out. Okay, so like that, the internal flow of execution works. Okay, I hope you got the clarity on this. So now let's understand this different kind of question, like what happens if an exception occurs in a static block. So here, if you can observe in a public class, okay, there is one public class written. Within that, I'm having one static block over here. So within that, I'm having this static block. Okay, then I'm having main method. You know, right? Static block gets executed when? Before main method. Okay, so when the class loader actually loads the classes, during that point of time before execution of main method, the static block gets executed. Okay, so it will not go to main method first of all, it will go to static method. It will print static block gets executed, and after that it will see what is written. It's 10 divided by 0. Okay, this is actually arithmetic exception. So this has not been caught over there in the static block. So what will happen? It will not return back to JVM. Okay, first of all, after executing this static block, it will go to the main method try block. Within main method try block, it will print main method executed, and then it will try to create the object. And then within that, after that, what will happen? It will go to the catch block. So will it print these two lines? Will it come here? Do let me know. No, it will not come here, because in a static block only it started throwing me exception. Okay, so in that scenario, it will not go to these statements directly. It will try to see like whether it's being caught in the parent class methods or not. So here it will go to main method, and directly it will try to see like whether is there any catch block which handles this exception or not. So here there is exception in initializer error. So this is one of the exception that is being thrown, okay, that is being caught basically. So if there is any kind of exception in a static block, it will try to be catch in exception initialization error. So this is one of the initialization error class being created. So any kind of exception coming in static block, it will be get caught over here, and it will print caught this error, and it will print the cause of it. So it will print arithmetic exception. Okay, so like that, this is one of the flow that we have to understand. Okay, so whenever is there any error coming in the static block, we have to handle it within catch block with exception initializer error. Okay, so this is an important question. Okay, this has not been asked much, but it can be asked. So you should be prepared with it. Yeah, so let's understand next type of question. Can you throw an exception from constructor? Yes, it can be thrown. If I'm creating one constructor and there we can throw exception, then let's suppose I have put some value like I am throwing exception when negative value is being passed. Okay, and from the main method, when I'm creating the object, I am passing the negative value. In that scenario, it will go to the constructor, and then it will see like if there is any exception being thrown. Yes, exception is being thrown when negative value is passed. So it will start throwing me exception. So yes, it's totally possible to throw exception from the constructor, but it's not reliable. Basically, we should not make use of this, because it will make the code very much tedious and complex to understand. Okay, at each and every instance, you have to go to the constructor. So don't think from small code point of view. Try to think from the real-time project perspective. So in that scenario, if you go to the constructor, there, if you are creating lot of logic you are writing in constructor, then what will happen? as many times you are creating the object within the main method or within certain methods present within that entire flow, at each and every instance you have to go to the constructor and check whether this condition is satisfied or not, whether it's right or not. So it's very much tedious and complex. So if it is being used at one place, try to handle then and there itself. Don't try to put it within constructor. So it's not feasible enough and it's not followed as well in the IT sector. Okay, we should not throw anything, and we should not put much of a business logic within constructor unless it is explicitly provided as a requirement. Okay, so this is the thing. Like, yes, we can throw exception, but it's not feasible. What's the purpose of custom exception? So, right, we can create one custom exception. Like, let's suppose similar to file not found exception, we can create our own exception, customized exception, like student not found exception or employee not found exception. This is not inbuilt library been defined for this kind of exception. So for that, we need to create one class, and then we can throw exception. Okay, within that class, we can throw exception for that, and then we can create one super method. That is, we can create one constructor for it. Okay, from the constructor we can call super method, and then we can throw a message like, if this under some condition only this exception will be thrown, right? It will not be thrown any scenario. There can be certain condition, like if the student is not found in a particular class, then I want to throw this exception, like student not found exception. So then we can create one custom exception class, throwing exception or runtime exception. Then we can create constructor out of it. Then we can have a super method with some message, and then we can pass that message from the caller method or from the main method. Like that, we can have a custom exception. So can you explain try with resources? So this type of question can also come in the interviews, right? So try with resources is nothing. It is just to handle the scenarios where we have to, where we should not have headache to close the object stream by ourselves explicitly. Okay, so if you observe over here in try with resources section, I am trying to create the object of buffer reader to read the properties of a file by going to that particular path. In that scenario, it will go through each and every lines of that file, and it will print the line data. Okay, and then it will go to catch block. If there is any exception coming while executing the lines or records of that file, it will start throwing me error or exception. Okay, but I've not written any finally block over here. In finally block, we don't need to close these objects basically. Okay, it's not required, because that is the advantage of making use of private resources. So whenever we are making use of private resources, these objects will get auto closed. Okay, so whatever objects you are creating here within try block, it will get auto closed whenever the flow of execution gets over, whenever the stack flow is completed. Okay, so that is the advantage of making use of private sources section. I hope you got a clarity like why it is being used. So this question may be asked, okay, because this has come after Java 8, I think. So this whole process should be understood. Yeah, so I hope you got the clarity on this. So yeah, this is done for it. So I hope you have enjoyed this session. I've covered like almost all type of questions that can be asked with respect to core Java exception handling. I have not covered Spring Boot exception handling. So in Spring Boot level, it will not ask much of these detailed varieties. So then there they can ask like, how are you handling exception with respect to Spring Boot? So there you can have a different scenario like REST controller advice you can create. Okay, and then you can create a separate class with exception, direct exception handler over a method, and then you can throw exception from then and there itself. So there is a different strategy that we have to follow for Spring Boot. Okay, so I hope you have learned it. So if you want me to create a specific video on how to handle exception with respect to Spring Boot, do let me know in the chat box. I will create a specific video on that as well. Okay, so we'll see you in the next video with some next tricky type of questions. So till then, it's Devjit Roy signing off. Bye bye.